everyone. I'm Frank Novak, and this is Point of Reference. Tonight, we are broadcasting live and taking your phone calls on what may become a very controversial subject, the location of a medical marijuana dispensary in the city of Haverhill. To give us and you more information to make an informed decision on this subject, we are pleased to have two Haverhill residents that have publicly weighed in on this subject but have opposing points of view. They are Dr. John Maddox, head physician of the Haverhill Public School System and practicing pediatrician in opposition to a dispensary in Haverhill, and Mr. Michael Scroth, who holds a master's degree in education and is a biology teacher in the Lawrence School System, who is in favor of a dispensary in Haverhill. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
If I might be able to go ahead and say from the outset that if we're talking about scientifically, the merits of the compounds, whether they're the compounds, enzymes, or elements that happen to be found in marijuana, are we all agreed that there are some elements in there that in fact can help people that may be affected adversely by chemotherapy or multiple sclerosis or any of these, or perhaps several other ills? Are we on common ground for something of that type?
I agree with that.
Because I think many people are thinking that if we're talking for or against a dispensary, you're either for or against the cure or the medication that we're talking about, the medicinal elements. But we're not talking about that here. We're talking about location, essentially. And if I could simply ask this question, from the outset, we talked about the ingredients that happen to be in marijuana and how that may be able to help. Can we basically just have maybe an opening statement from yourself, Mr. Michael Scroth? Did I pronounce your name?
Scroth.
Scroth, excuse me.
Yes.
If I could have basically an opening statement for how you happen to feel about that for people that happen to be in favor of having a dispensary here in the city of Haverhill.
Okay. Thank you, Frank. I think a medical marijuana dispensary is inevitable. We did approve it. The voters approved it. If you go online, you will find that more and more states are providing medical marijuana if they have not already legalized marijuana. But even if they have, they still are providing dispensaries. As we're thinking, it provides help with some very debilitating diseases. And I believe that. I believe that. I hope I never have to use it. I think what I'm looking for as a Haverhill resident is something that's safe. It provides safe access to medical marijuana for people in need, people who have real prescriptions from real doctors and a real relationship with their doctor. I don't think that we will notice the dispensary once it's in operation. I think it will be a normal part of our life. I don't think it will take up much of our thoughts. I don't think the product will be diverted to other uses. I think the Department of Public Health has thought about these things, and I'm not an expert in this part, but they're charging money for this. The street price is a different price, lower, and I think you have to pay a premium to get medical marijuana. I don't think that's going to be diverted. I think the clinic will be professionally and ethically run, and these are these are the questions I've asked, and I've done my own research, and I've come up some answers on these. I've always wondered, will the community benefit from this? And I believe it will, in that not only people will be served who need medical marijuana, we will benefit through tax revenue. We will benefit through having some people move into our community, taking jobs, which will be professional people who will be part of our community, part of the fabric of our community. That's what I'm looking for. I think it's inevitable. It may take a while to get there, but we'll get there. And I'm also part of the community gardens, and I love the trees in this community. And I'm hoping the people who move in and do this dispensary will be good community members, like Covanta, Pentucket Bank, those type of things, that they will take an interest in the community. And that's That's what I
Very
do.
good. Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Michael. You know, before we get to Dr. Maddox, I do want to let people know that this is a call-in program this evening, and the telephone number is 978-372-8070. That's 978-372-8070. Dr. Maddox.
Well, I think that the reason that I've taken a stand and feel the responsibility to speak out on this issue really come from three basic issues. One is I believe that medical marijuana, as it's currently configured, is a flawed concept. The poppy seed has ingredients that help people, but we're not having an opium dispensary. Medicine that can help certain cardiac conditions comes from the foxglove plant, but we're not having a foxglove dispensary. The ingredients that exist in marijuana should be processed in the same way that all medications are, safely, through the FDA's oversight. And I believe, and I think the track record shows, that medical marijuana is really a Trojan horse for the legalization of marijuana. In states that approved medical marijuana early on, like Colorado and Oregon, the legalization comes next. And we know that marijuana legalization is a hot item in Massachusetts. And so the toe gets in the door with medical, but then it's followed by legalization. So I think if we recognize that for what it is, it's important to be truthful. Often people talk about cancer patients and these kinds of severe illnesses. But in Colorado, 3% of patients that use medical marijuana are cancer patients. Most patients that use medical marijuana are young males. Advertising is usually conducted with scantily clad women to attract them to different dispensaries, similar to beer ads. And that's the reality in Colorado. So for us to think about the legitimate medical needs that certain people have, those people would better be served for their marijuana to come through their pharmacy like every other medication does. So I think it's a flawed concept. I'll go on to add quickly that I also am disturbed as a Haverhill voter and a Haverhill citizen with the process. There was a vote the state passed to approve the concept of medical marijuana, and it passed, and I respect the voters' vote. Many people have said since then, I wish I had known then in 2012 what I know now, but the vote did pass in 2012. But that vote to approve the concept of medical marijuana was then left to a process where each community could have a say in whether they wanted it here. And I don't think that there's any secret, I think it's a well-documented track, that process, through the DPH, through actions of Healthy Farms, and through actions of our own elected officials, was not an honest process. And so to distort the voters' passage of a concept and to distort that into the way that really the Haverhill's residents' ability to voice whether they wanted it in their backyard, that wasn't followed, and I have an issue with that. The final comment is it's been a huge honor of mine for the last 3 years to serve as the Haverhill school physician. So I have my own beliefs. I respect other people's beliefs. I feel an obligation and a responsibility to the children of Haverhill. And I believe that if a marijuana facility opens up in this town, and we can talk about the reasons why I have a conviction about this, I believe that that will directly contribute to and add to the substance abuse problems we have that include the heroin deaths.
Dr. Maddox, Mr. Schroth, a question for you, and that is that when the question of legalizing medical marijuana was on the ballot in the state of Massachusetts, there was a friend of mine who was the head of a substance abuse counseling agency that had asked me how I planned to vote on this type of issue. And I said, you know, my heart goes out to people that suffer from different illnesses and suffer from chemotherapy and cancer treatment, and if this is the way that they're able to get, you know, some sort of a relief, you know, I would hate to deny that from them. And he said, you're really going to do that? And I said, why? I would think that you would suggest that, given your position and what you do. And he said, absolutely not. And I said, how can that be? And what he imparted to me was, he said, Frank, the elements that are found in marijuana that are supposed to be of a medicinal purpose can in fact be put in pill form. And they can be dispensed that way, as you suggest, Dr. Maddox, perhaps in a pill form through a pharmacy or something of that type. Well, then I was a little confused, because I said, well, why is there such a strong push to be able to use medical marijuana if you're telling me, in your position, that you can get the same elements somehow in a different way? Is it like a generic type of circumstance where sometimes generics don't work as much as the purest form? And he said, no, that has nothing to do with it. He says, it's the same thing, but it's just in a pill form. I said, so why is it that they're talking about medical marijuana if they already can have it in pill form? And quite frankly, gentlemen, he looked at me and he said, follow the money. Now, let's go to that particular point, if we can. Who profits from being able to have a dispensary in the city of Haverhill or a dispensary anywhere else? I know that the impact of this program has reached far and wide, to the point that the attorney for, I guess, the people that are looking to have a dispensary here in Haverhill called me while on vacation in Florida and spent about 45 minutes on the telephone with me today to be able to discuss some of these particular things. But the issue that I have that I would like to ask is, and when he, by the way, he reiterated to me that there are certain benefits to the community right now that would allow, if they would allow having this dispensary put in the city, by certain types of, I'm not sure if they're called impact fees, but contributions to the betterment of the city in the forms of maybe thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. But that would have to happen, and you'd have to agree to it now, because in the near future that won't be there. So it almost seems like a dangling carrot, but it makes me wonder, if we follow the money, where does it go? Do either of you gentlemen have an impression or an idea about that, or does it matter to you? Mr. Sharath?
Well, I do think it matters. I think we need to know where the money's coming from to set this up. I think we need to know where the money does go. I'm sure somebody is going to make a profit, and that's fine. That's a business. Mm-hmm. Expect that people will do that. If it's too much money, there's always other. Mm-hmm. There's also, the State House has also been involved in this, the House of Representatives. Right. Somehow, I have some articles where the House of Representatives president mm-hmm. wanted to change everything, like do away with all those licenses and start mm-hmm. out again, and maybe that was the right thing to do. But I sense that I have a feeling that, as you said, there's money there, and that's why they're interested. Mm-hmm. And that's a very good question. Those are the questions that we should be asking, of course.
The question, Dr. Maddox, is this: the elements that are found in the marijuana plant or the marijuana cigarette that somebody may use and smoke and digest, are they available in pill form now as we speak?
Yes, there are two forms. The ingredient that is in marijuana is called a cannabinoid. Those are the chemical compounds that have the therapeutic benefits. There are two currently approved FDA products that include cannabinoid medicines. One of them is called Marinol. It is used for the nausea and vomiting from chemotherapy. The problem is it is in pill form, so the person that's having nausea and vomiting can't tolerate the oral medicine without throwing it back up.
I see.
But what is exciting is that there is another medicine called Sativex. This is in use in Canada and Europe. and it is on the track towards approval in the US. This is a oral spray. So these medicines, through the regular process, are available. I think I'd like to take one comment about your where follow the money, which I think is a very sage comment. Around 1900, there were very few cigarettes in this country. The tobacco industry found a way to sell tobacco to the American public. And we spent 50 years getting the American public addicted to cigarettes. And there's a lot of evidence that marijuana is following the same path. And one of the questions we have to ask is, are we going to let them? The question related to Haverhill is whether it's $1,000 or whether it's $50,000 that this company is promising us. Are we going to do the wrong thing for the right price? And if there is a child who takes marijuana from a diverted stock, and we know this happens, and we can talk about the statistics, gets hooked on marijuana because it is addictive, moves on to harder drugs, can we go back to that family and say, we're sorry what happened to your child, but the city did get X thousand dollars for that? I think we have to think very carefully about being lured to do the wrong thing if the price is right.
Gentlemen, let's take a call, our first call of the evening. This is Joe. Joe, you're on the air.
Hi, yes, this is Joe. So a couple minutes ago, Dr. Maddox stated that there is a concern that medical marijuana is a Trojan horse to recreational marijuana, which I think is a pretty valid concern. However, what would you say in response to the success of the legalization of recreational marijuana in the state of Colorado, where the legalization has resulted in an additional $40 million in tax revenue, violent rates have dramatically dropped, statewide traffic fatalities have declined, and the state is enjoying its lowest unemployment rate in years?
Okay, thank you, Joe.
No problem.
Well, he stated several facts that differ from my understanding of the reality in Colorado.
Okay.
My understanding that since the loosening of laws related to marijuana, they're dealing with significant motor vehicle accidents and deaths. They're dealing with ingestions by children showing up at the emergency room intoxicated with marijuana. The number of school expulsions and disciplinary actions has gone up. So I suspect that the debate about what's going on in Colorado may be on the scope of this show. My contention is Haverhill better off with the dispensary or without? And I feel strongly that we're better without. Our own chief of police was asked in front of city council about his opinion about the dispensary, and has said it's his preference for it not to be here, but he recognizes that it's his job to carry out whatever decisions are made.
With all due respect to the call that came in, maybe it depends depending upon which set of statistics you happen to be looking at, because many times they can be somewhat self-serving depending upon which side you happen to be on. I had a conversation with a very gracious young lady who happens to be the deputy director of the Massachusetts Patient Advocacy Alliance, and her name is Nicole Snow. And she was kind enough we had a long conversation about this in preparation for the show, and was very kind to be able to send me some resource information. I can't get through all of it right now, but she came up with a very interesting study. I guess the Journal of American Medical Association study said that there's a 25% decrease in opiate-related deaths in medical marijuana states. Dr. Maddox, how do you reconcile something of that type? I mean, I know one size does not fit all, but
I think that's a short-term data set. I think one of the things that is interesting, and is also a reminder of how what we're talking about really is pretty advanced science. I mean, a biology teacher, I think, would certainly appreciate that. The brain has certain receptors, receptors that respond to opioids, like heroin, and receptors that respond to cannabinoids. There is a lot of connectiveness. The New York Times put out a piece in the last 3 months, and the title of the article was "The Feel-Good Gene." And the research is suggesting that some people have a genetic predisposition to the effects of cannabinoids like marijuana and to opiates.
In the same way, some people are predisposed, let's say, to alcoholism based upon their, physiology and their makeup?
I think that's right.
Okay.
I think the research is also becoming very clear about the way that people that begin using marijuana eventually become tolerant of a certain percentage and dose of marijuana and crave more and crave more. And eventually, and drug dealers know this, they become very ripe customers to begin taking opioids. So I think the shift between how a person might use marijuana and shift back between alcohol, opiates, marijuana, it all leads down the same bad path. And I think that is the biggest concern. And when I see evidence like that of short-term changes, when the medical marijuana advocates use that as a argument, I think they're shooting themselves in the foot, because those short-term changes, if you follow them out for a longer period of time, I think we will be making the opiate problem worse.
I've got another question for both of you gentlemen, but next let's take a phone call from Ryan. Ryan, you're on the air.
Oh, hi. I missed the last couple minutes waiting. I just almost blew a gasket when I heard about the Sativex spray, the sublingual thing developed by Bayer. It's not, in fact, available in the United States. Marinol is the only alternative as far as pharmaceutical goes. In some background, I'm speaking as a multiple sclerosis patient for 12 years and a father of 2 that will be entering the Haverhill school system. It looks like this debate is getting more along into the program itself and whether medical marijuana has any place in our culture, and less about why Haverhill is a good or bad place for a dispensary. I would like us to get ahead of this issue. If recreational use comes down, as it seems to be, and all the worries that Dr. Maddox has expressed about the way it's being handled in Colorado, I completely agree with. We have the opportunity here to set the tone for how the program is established, how the community accepts it, and how we're going to bring our children up in this.
Ryan, you're fading in and out a little bit. If you could just get closer to the phone receiver, if that's okay.
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 Where'd you lose me? Here I am.
You're okay now. Yep.
I would like us to get ahead of this before we run into the same problems that Dr. Maddox referred to in Colorado, the way it's being marketed. We have the opportunity to approach this like adults and treat each other like adults while getting our treatment, while raising our children responsibly. And, I'm sorry, I would just like to see, I'm a new resident of Haverhill. I've only been here a few years. If there's some valid reason why Haverhill is a bad idea, I still haven't heard it.
Okay.
And I guess that's my point.
Thank you, Ryan. The gentleman, here's a question for you, and that is this. I know that some people have suggested, and you yourself, Dr. Maddox, had said that there are, given the fact that maybe Haverhill may be considered a higher risk community given the number of heroin deaths that had occurred. It was in 2013 that the, heroin usage in Methuen, which is a sister city demographically to Haverhill, was up 13%. The question that I've got here, and to Ryan's question, meaning let's talk more about the location of this dispensary rather than about the benefits or liabilities of medical marijuana, because we're talking here about the ramifications that may be associated with where the location is. Now, I know previously in talking with other people, not from a medical marijuana standpoint, but they were looking to go ahead and cite a methadone clinic somewhere. And a methadone clinic was, there are certain parallels, and I'm not a scientist and I'm not a physician, so I would defer to you on this subject, but when you talk to somebody about being able to put a methadone clinic in any particular neighborhood or in any particular business setting, you might as well just set their hair on fire. It wasn't going to happen, and they weren't going to have it.
But it's up and running now, isn't it?
I believe it is, up along the border of the city of Haverhill. Now, and that had happened. Now, there are questions when you think of this, when people are worried about what of the ramifications or the associations that go along with a methadone clinic. What are some of the ramifications or associations that you think people are fearful of if they have a marijuana dispensary? And I defer to both of you gentlemen. Mr. Schroth?
I did a little research on this, and they were, I think a dispensary had opened up, and they were worried about people camping out and people driving under the influence. And from what I understand, that you have a card to get you have permission to get this medical marijuana, and if you violate any of those conditions, they can revoke that privilege that you have there. Those are a couple things that I read about.
And why don't we take, before Dr. Maddox, I go to you on the same type of question. Let's go to John, who's on line 1. John, you're on the air.
Hi. I'm the father of 2 boys that have grown up in Haverhill, and I guess a lot of my focus is on what's the impact of marijuana use in Haverhill, and so I'm curious if Dr. Maddox can tell us anything about the incidence of marijuana use among youth. Thank you.
Okay. Is that an association, can you answer that question as in association with the ramifications of a dispensary being there? Because once again, I don't want to just talk about pros and cons of marijuana itself. I want to talk about locations.
Right. I mean, that's the relationship between marijuana use, particularly in youth, is one of the reasons I feel most strongly that this is the wrong place to put a dispensary. There are certain places, and Haverhill is one of them, where the incidence of youth using marijuana before the age of 13 is higher than the state average. The state average is somewhere around 7%. Haverhill's is around 11%. I think that the state should have, for reasons of public safety, made a decision that says, once the voters approved medical marijuana, let's locate them. Let's think about access to patients that are eligible to use medical marijuana. But let's think about not causing harm. Let's think about not putting a dispensary in a town where there's already a use of marijuana among youth that is higher than the state average. So Haverhill already has that problem, and there is a direct relationship, and you can see it over time. For youth, the more they perceive marijuana as being harmless, the more they're likely to use. And that relationship, I have charts here, and I can show that to you. That's very well established.
You're talking about a vulnerability quotient, essentially.
A vulnerability quotient. And I think about one of the callers, I think the caller that has multiple sclerosis was talking about maybe Haverhill has a chance to do this the right way. And maybe prevent some of the problems that Colorado had. Well, I don't think we're off to a good start. The company that is assigned to be here had a person working with them that already had their license in Colorado revoked. The same company has already been fined by the state for non-disclosure of important documents. Our own public officials have had to revoke letters that were signed and misrepresented. So we're not off to a good start if we're going to do things the right way. And sometimes when people show you their true character, you better believe them.
Gentlemen, we're going to take a call from Leanne next, but as I take that call, I'd like you both to ponder this question. When we come back from that question, that is that where is the best place to have a dispensary? And what would that be? What would your answers be to that? But let's take a call from Leanne. Leanne, you're on the air. Hello?
Mr. Novak, you just hit on it exactly right. There's lots of points that I would like to tackle with both of these people,
okay,
as far as education and keeping this away from children, but this is a Haverhill community television, so what I would like to know is with our population in the state and with the overwhelming vote in the state, it seems like Haverhill's trying to zone them out. There's a need for people and there's a need for patients. We have public access to transportation and ways for people to get here. And I understand that you think this isn't the right way to put it, but a drug-ridden city. I think Haverhill's come up in the past 10 years and moved away from a lot of the bad aspects that it had. And it's trying to make a revitalization in the town. And I think a dispensary would be a good part. I'm not a proponent of the company that wants to come to this town. My interests lie otherwhere, but I just think that for the patients in Massachusetts, this is a great opportunity for the city of Haverhill to benefit, not only financially, but from the social impact people will have that work in the dispensary to try to put together a community of wellness and helping people out and doing community service. So I'd like to know where you think they should be seated, because a population of 60+ thousand people with transportation, there has to be access here. And that's where I'll leave it for you guys.
Okay, thank you, Leanne. Gentlemen, the question to you, where is the best place to have a dispensary if it wouldn't be in Haverhill?
Well, I think, my opinion is Haverhill is a fine spot for it. As Leanne says, we are coming up. I think we're ready for something like that. I know our inner city is viewed as a problem spot, but I think having another business that is a taxpayer and community active in the community is everyone we get like that is a plus. So if you said outside of Haverhill, it wouldn't matter to me.
Okay.
I don't think they're going to take it in Andover. I just don't think we're going to.
Why would you say that?
Because it's in their backyard. Because they would say, not in my backyard, just like I have said in the past. Okay, not in my backyard. And so, that's right. So yes, we are the spot, and let's accept it. I'm thinking. Let's accept it, and let's say, you know what? Heck with you. We're going to take it, and we're going to be real successful with this. And you're going to wish, in the end, that you had said yes to a business that was basically a medical dispensary. That is what it is. And
with what the previous caller Leanne happened to say, Dr. Maddox, a question to you. With what the previous caller Leanne said was in touting the benefits of being able to have this type of circumstance and this type of dispensary located in Haverhill, where they're talking about, I guess, off of Route 97 in an industrial park, which is a little odd, but be that as it may, that's the location. And with the benefits that she associates with that, and with the compensatory items that the city would be able to benefit from, and the donations, and whether they're called impact fees or anything else, what if locating that dispensary in Haverhill with where they're talking about, what if it is the right thing to do?
Well, I think if there was a democratic, transparent process.
What if they're right?
I would love to be wrong. I would love for all the things that have happened that have been unethical, fined, revoked, to vanish, and for us to suddenly be dealing with an upright, healthy process that is not going to cause harm to any of our citizens. I wish that was the case. I don't believe it is.
You think too many shenanigans have been going on?
Well, I think there's
I
think that's one big part of it. I think even if it was perfectly done and there hadn't been shenanigans, I still think that our most vulnerable citizens are put at risk by bringing this close. The state, when the law passed, the state said it's our goal to have 98% of our citizens within 25 miles of a dispensary. There's one opening in Lowell, there's one opening in Salem. This dispensary is not necessary. This dispensary could be taken offline and the state's goals of access to patients would still be realized. I have many, you've heard my biggest concerns. The thing that has surprised me is I've heard other citizens join my concern and my position opposed to this being here, have also a love for Haverhill. And they have said, we've taken the trash incinerator that nobody else wanted. We've taken the methadone clinic that nobody else wanted. We're number 2 in Essex County in heroin deaths. We get paper articles all the time, police arrests, people coming down to Maine to buy drugs here. I think that one of the things that people feel strongly about is enough. Let somebody else take this. Let's not be first. Haverhill already has an evolving reputation of being a drug haven, and like it or not, this adds to it.
Mr. Schroth, my question to you would be this. Well, first of all, let me just preface that with, once again, referencing Nicole Snow, who's the Deputy Director of the Massachusetts Patient Advocacy Alliance, told me, he says, you know, Frank, it's pretty tough when I know somebody that could benefit from the use of medical marijuana, that could benefit from that, but they'd have to go at this point in time to Portland, Maine in order to get this. And you're, basically, that sort of compelling factor pulls at your heartstrings, and it's tough. But now, to balance that off in a different way, let me ask you this question. In the same way I asked Dr. Maddox, what if you're right? Okay? Now the question I'm going to ask you is, what if he's right and you're wrong? Because the fact is, if things go wrong, well, we didn't take this into account, or is there a legacy that we're left to have to go ahead and deal with? My question to you, what if you're wrong?
Okay. No, that's a great question, and that's what I've been thinking about really all along as I've investigated this.
Yes.
And Dr. Maddox mentioned some shenanigans, and I don't know if they were just because
He did not. That was my term, and if it was too harsh, I apologize.
No, things are. It's a company that has not been in this business before, and I think they had a consultant from out of state, Colorado, which they had. I don't think. And I approached this from the perspective is, how would I, if I wanted to open up a medical marijuana dispensary, how would I go about it? I mean, think about what you'd have to do, yeah. And I would hire a consultant, somebody who's done it, and I might not know the quality of them or whatever. So I think that might not be a fair criticism. But if I'm wrong, I think this will. Here's my theory. Yeah. It'll all work. We will come up with the right decision, right or wrong. We will come to a consensus on this, and I think I'll be able to live with it, whether it's for it or not. I have high hopes that it will be cited in Haverhill, that all those things that I stated. I have high hopes, and I know the effect. I mean, marijuana has on people, especially adolescents. I tell my students, marijuana reduces your IQ. Was it 5 to 7 points? I say, some of you just can't. You can't do that. Okay, and it does, and that's significant. That's significant. And I'll tell you, they have a very lax attitude towards marijuana. I almost would like to see it legalized and out in the open. Like you come in drunk, and we get you right there. I almost hate to see it under the radar so much. So anyway.
I appreciate that. And not meaning to put both of you on the spot, but what if, that's why I wanted to ask the question, because it's either one way or the other way, and sometimes the gray areas don't help anybody. So I just wanted to see what the ramifications or pros and cons were. We're going to take another call. We're going to take a call from Sherwin now, and then I've got a couple of other questions for you to ponder and just to give me what your take is on this. Sherwin, you're on the air.
Sherwin Theodore.
Yes, sir.
Sherwin Theodore.
Go right ahead.
My question is, I've never heard anyone actually flipping out and going crazy over marijuana. Why doesn't the city deal with the issues at hand, such as the heroin problem, and leave marijuana alone? There's a great financial benefit that could come from these dispensaries. The city's in debt.
Okay, that's fair. You know, so he's talking about the difference between something that may be considered a more severe type of drug versus marijuana. True?
I think if you have a lax attitude to marijuana, you might have a lax attitude towards other substances too. I mean, I think there are some people who are prone to be alcoholics, and I think some people like marijuana. Now, I've smoked marijuana. It's not for me. I can't do my job if I'm stoned. Okay. It's not going to, and it's going to severely affect me, and so.
You know, gentlemen, I appreciate that. Yeah. And here are the two things that I wanted to go ahead and express to you and to give me what your take is on this relative to what we've got here. And if we're talking about not the so-called the benefits or liabilities of medical marijuana, we're talking about locations. Let's talk about location for just a second. One of the lobbyists that was involved in being able to try to bring this company to Haverhill was former Senator James Jajuga, who happened to be the former president of the Chamber of Commerce and is now currently a lobbyist that represented them. The curious thing that I happen to have here, and I did give Senator Jajuga a call earlier before the program. I was unable to get in touch with him, so the fact that I asked him to return the call. He maybe didn't get the message as of yet, so I cannot fault him for that. But the question that I have here that's curious is the fact that Senator Jajuga is a resident of Methuen. Methuen is a sister city demographically to the city of Haverhill. Demographically, it's a sister city, just like the city of Haverhill. Being a former state senator, being a present city councilor, being a lobbyist for the placement of a medical marijuana dispensary, the question I just asked myself is, why wouldn't he see this as a benefit to the community in which he happens to live, and why would he not lobby to have the organization that he happens to represent have that dispensary in Methuen? Same proximity to the highway, essentially, same proximity to Boston and other metropolitan areas, but that subject never came up. And that was a question that I wanted to put forth to him, but I was unable to. But that's a question that I have. Next question is the fact that in a previous program that we happen to do here at HCTV on Point of Reference, we talked with the city's school drug counselor, Laura Mayer, who comes with a great experience and heavy credentials. And I asked her in passing, I said, relative to medical marijuana or the legalization of marijuana or the dispensaries, does she think that'll have a positive or negative impact overall? And I'm not going to quote her, I'm going to paraphrase. She seemed to indicate right out of the gate, she said, bad, it's going to be bad. It'll be a bad impact. And I said, well, how so? And her assertion was the fact that if adolescents or young people see that it's illegal in some other form for, let's say, people that may be sick or whatever their circumstance happens to be, that as a youth, they're looking for some type of rationalization to say, see, if they can do it, then it must be okay, whether technically it's legal for me or not. Gentlemen, 2 points. The one having to do with the location, why not in Methuen? And I like Methuen, I do business in Methuen, but there's also, I have to deal with the fact that I'm dealing with somebody that's eyeball to eyeball with students every day, but from a different perspective as a drug counselor, but eyeball to eyeball in the same way that you are, Mr. Schroth, and with your students, the ones that you happen to teach. So ponder that for just a second. We're going to go to a call. Dan, you're on the air.
Thank you. As I listen,
Turn your TV down, Dan.
It's off.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. As I listen to the conversation, I'm struck by the analogy of marijuana to alcohol. And my experience is that alcohol is a much more dangerous drug than marijuana. And we have alcohol dispensaries all over the place in neighborhoods, and children see their parents drinking, and even in some cultures, allowing children to drink is part of the culture. In Europe, it's not uncommon for a child to have a drink with the family at a family celebration.
And I'm wondering what the fuss is about marijuana in particular. And we're not even talking about legalization here. We're just talking about a medical dispensary for medical purposes. I mean, you've got sick people. This is proven to help sick people. This law was passed in 2012. This was supposed to be online 2 years ago. We're way behind the ball here.
Dan, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Would you, and this goes to the gentleman here in the dais as well, and the question is, do you think we'd have as much of a controversy on medical marijuana right now if it were in pill form and if it were distributed or available by prescription through local commercial pharmacies like Walgreens, CVS, and Rite Aid, rather than a single location dispensary? If it were just in pill form, would that solve the problem?
It might. You know, I haven't done the research on the pill. Some people have told me it's not as effective as getting it from the plant directly. Mm-hmm. I don't know, and the doctor said that there's a new medicine in the pipeline that's a kind of a spray form. I don't know if that's as effective as, as the plant. I know there's many, many different strains of THC and CBC, and some strains are helpful for one illness, another strain is helpful for another illness. I don't see the big deal here. I mean, we had prohibition back in the 20s for 13 years. It was a disaster, and we're continuing drug prohibition, and this is, to me, much less of a danger than alcohol.
I think it's a matter here, business-wise, personally, and from a community standpoint, and if I'm editorializing, I'm sorry, but we're talking about risk-reward ratio, if we're using a business term. And that, as I asked both Dr. Maddox and Mr. Schroth, what if each one of their positions is wrong? And the fact is, Dan, what if the position that you have, I'll ask you, as I asked these two gentlemen, what if your position is wrong? We say, what's the big deal? What if it turns out that the ramifications negatively were far more reaching than you had even considered or thought would happen?
Well, I think the data is pretty clear on how dangerous alcohol is. People die all the time from alcohol.
No, I understand that, but I'm not looking at that comparison. I'm looking at this, because many cases, Dan, if it's okay, I'm going to go on to another conversation, but I invite you to listen up, okay? Thank you very much. The thing of the two items that I happened to mention before we took the call, if I could ask you gentlemen to address those issues, Laura Mayer, the drug counselor for the City of Haverhill School System, and also location. Why is it, if it's such a great deal, and we've got the lobbyist for the company who's also a city, why didn't he say go there?
I think Haverhill was given the license. I don't think it was, as I remember, Lawrence said, no, we definitely don't want it here.
Okay.
I don't think Methuen even weighed in on it, and I think Haverhill, I think it was for Haverhill.
Okay.
I think
That's accurate, but I think your accounting is right, that they contacted Jim Jajuga, and he had a decision on how to use his skills.
Yeah, as a lobbyist.
And you're right, he did not put it in his own town, and I think it would be a good question to have him answer. Related to Laura Mayer and her experience at the high school, I've worked with her as she started being at the high school and getting familiar with Haverhill, and her concerns are very consistent with mine, and consistent with yours. Mm-hmm. The kids today, and the medical marijuana is fueling this, have a sense that this is medicine. This is not harmful. This doesn't drop your IQ. This doesn't put you at risk for mental illness. This doesn't lead as a gateway drug to harder drugs. It may be hard to see this on camera. This is a poster that students at Haverhill High made and was in the hallways. And they've taken that marijuana can help with the side effects of chemotherapy for cancer to now it is curing cancer.
Can I read that?
Yeah.
So it says cannabis is my medicine and it cured my cancer. Okay, so,
Yeah.
Well, interesting.
And so I think, when a group of adolescents in Colorado that was in substance abuse treatment
Yep,
was interviewed, and they said, "Where did you get your marijuana from?"
right.
75% of them got it from diverted dispensary stock. They got their pot that they used as teenagers from a black market,
That's,
from patients that used their cards, got their pot, and then sold it. Look at where this dispensary is located. Draw a map to Haverhill High School.
Yep.
Why didn't Jim DeJuga want it in Methuen? For the same reasons, they're not having this discussion in Andover, they're not having this discussion in Newburyport, they're having it in Haverhill.
Gentlemen, and the other question that I had brought up, and maybe it was a rhetorical question, but maybe I could get an answer from the both of you shortly so we can go on to the next call, but that is, in the same way, everybody remembers Blockbuster Video. Blockbuster Video was a colossus in the communications industry relative to movies and everything else. Now, poof, they're gone, because the dynamics changed as far as communications with CDs, no longer videos, and now you can get everything on demand, online, with your television, and that's fine. If we were not talking about the marijuana cigarette and being able to smoke that, once again, and if we were talking about having everything that you need in pill form, and it was dispensed by prescription through CVS, Rite Aid, and Walgreens, and other local drugstores, would we be having this conversation?
I like the pill thing. I like the pill thing. And then it would definitely separate it from the legalization of marijuana. Now, that would be a separate issue.
Okay.
But unfortunately, it's not. And that's a tough call, because even the research on this, you can get it both ways. I mean, it's hard to figure out whether this is really effective or not, and when, I know but it's a potent compound. And we have gotten a lot of medicines from plants, aspirin, you mentioned digitalis from the foxglove plant, things like that. And there's still Taxol,
And you may be a biology teacher, but your hobby, you are a horticulturalist, if I'm not mistaken, too. But Dr. Maddox, before we talk with you on that subject, if it's okay, we're going to go to Jeff. Jeff, you're on the air.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much for taking my call, and thank you for bringing such an important topic up on your show tonight for Haverhill, because it is really important. And I think I'm coming from the point of view from a vast majority of the citizens in Haverhill really don't know all the facts on either side. So it's good to have these two gentlemen here tonight, kind of explain some of their views. But I think for most people listening tonight, they've already got their minds made up. So I think for the many people out there that maybe aren't listening tonight, say even like new families that might be thinking about living, moving to Haverhill, where they have kids or plan on having kids, I think when they hear that Haverhill may become a place for a marijuana dispensary, I very strongly believe that's a turnoff for a lot of people, and they will look to other towns surrounding us, and maybe they'll live there instead because they just don't want to be around that environment. I mean, if you ask a lot of the people in Haverhill, a lot of the people that we know, other citizens, is that it's not a good thing for Haverhill. It's a negative thing, and for all the positive things that have gone great for this city with Merrimack Street and so many other things, this is a few steps back. And there's a reason why Andover, Methuen, probably all these other towns, don't want it, because it's the right, they don't want the negative thing either. And if you had a vote today, obviously Massachusetts passed it, but if you had a vote for Haverhill residents on this issue, there's no doubt it would fail hands down. So it's a shame that we couldn't vote on it. But those are my thoughts, and I know there's a lot of signatures right now that are against this thing, and I hope they get a lot more signatures, and I hope the politicians listen as well to the citizens. Like, we do not want this in our city. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Jeff. The question, gentlemen, associated negativity, whether it's real or perceived. If it's perceived, left unchallenged, it becomes real. Let me just tell you this, not looking to put both of you on the spot. I remember years ago We all know that it was a North Andover circumstance where it was where the Lawrence Airport is located. Lawrence Airport is located in North Andover, okay? Large tract of land there. They were going to have affordable housing because they figured, you know, we find that North Andover does not have a lot of affordable housing. So they're going to put affordable housing there under a 40B project or something at that time. Well, people went crazy. They didn't want to do that, and when they interviewed one of the parties happened to say, and they quoted him in the paper, and I think we could go back and find this, and it's very telling because the person happened to say was a resident of North Andover at the time, and this is not an indictment of that entire community. I like these people in North Andover as well. But this fellow happened to say, he says, well, that's why we pay the big bucks we do for North Andover to keep those people out of here. Now, he was talking at that time about people that were not of the same socioeconomic income level that he happened to be in. But it's kind of interesting because beneath the surface of the platitudes and the gracious dialogue, sometimes you scratch the surface, you get to the real deal. And I think that's why in many cases we don't see an advocacy for this type of circumstance in other communities because of what the perceived notion is behind it, even though the nobility of the purpose for what it's supposed to do is laudable and is good. The question here, people are just afraid of the ramifications, and if you let the door open and it happens, then what else is going to happen that they didn't take into account? I want to get to another call, but it's very interesting. One of the when I talked with Mr. Romano, who's the attorney for the organization that was plans on coming in, he said, you know, Frank, if people with the fewer locations and dispensaries that they happen to have, they would issue personal licenses to people to go ahead and grow this marijuana themselves on their own property and have that done. And I said, okay. And he said, so, you know, but so that sort of thing would happen. And I said, I believe it would, and I believe it is happening right now without licenses and without permission. Now, I'm not sure, gentlemen, if one of you happened to say that if we're talking about if rather than having people grow this marijuana themselves, if they were doing it clandestinely, they would be able to buy it at a particular dispensary, and that would be maybe a higher quality or a higher value attributed to that, and that's what they would do. But my question is, why would they do that if they could grow it on their own? Great question.
I think that what you're pointing out is this is the Wild West. This is unregulated, and I interpret that as I do the issue about whether Healthy Farms is going to provide money to the city. These are threats. These are, if you don't allow this dispensary to be here, then people are going to be growing pot all over the place.
Right. Well, this is what
I think that you can go back to the state's plan of having 98% of patients within 25 miles of delivery. When Healthy Farms came here and described their business model, they have a process for delivery, home delivery of their product from the dispensary to a person who maybe they're so ill they can't get out of the house. So you can take Haverhill offline, and with the Lowell and Salem dispensaries, the goal of access is realized. So I think that some of these hypothetical situations are scare tactics. You know, a couple comments over the last few calls that have built up. I think that alcohol is a problem, and two wrongs don't make a right. So in other words, it's very hard to make a difference on the problems that alcohol creates. It's very hard to make a difference in heroin deaths. Part of the reason that I feel passionate and I'm taking a stand on this is something that can be controlled and contained at an early stage. If it goes badly and we're dealing with problems 5 years from now or 10 years from now, it's going to be much harder to fix then. So part of why we're making a big deal about marijuana and a dispensary in a high-risk city like Haverhill is we can do something about it.
Before we take this next call, Dr. Maddox, a question for you to ponder that I'd like to get to after we finish the call, and that is, you in a statement that you happen to make in the letter to the editor, you talked about attempts to mitigate the diversion in Massachusetts with generous allowance of per-patient medical marijuana, which exceeds even those that are given in Colorado, creates an ample opportunity for marijuana to end up in the wrong hands. The question I want you to just take into account is, what if that amount, if they give an overly generous amount, what if that were curtailed significantly so that there wouldn't be anything of an extra nature that somebody might be able to do in the same way that they regulate pharmaceuticals, where you get so many pills, and if you happen to, geez, I ran out of these pills early, too bad. You're not going to get a new prescription because they count that out specifically for how many times you can use it and how many times you can have it. So you don't have that casual overage. Question for you, but let's go to this call. I'm not sure if it's Stephanie or Deb. It's Stephanie on one. Stephanie, you're on the air.
Hi, yes. Thank you very much for having me call in. I really appreciate it. I want to also say that I appreciate being able to call in and the topics that are being discussed tonight. I think they're incredibly relevant to our city, so thank you.
Great. I'm glad. Thank you very much.
I would like to say that I definitely agree, and I am for having a dispensary come to Haverhill. I think that it would be incredibly beneficial, tax reasons and things like that, and also some of the negative aspects that were touched on in regards to the city, meaning crime and drug use and things like that. I do think a lot of it could be averted by having marijuana come to the city. It would definitely alleviate a lot of unnecessary arrests, and for the medical aspect, it definitely does help people. I do think eventually it should, even potentially, the medical aspect should go away, and I'm for the legalization and regulation for tax purposes. I think it would be incredibly beneficial to the community, and I think we need that economic boost.
Stephanie, while you're on the air right now, my question to you is this: with the economic benefit that you think would be able to be derived from this, as well as being able to help people, would you think it's on par with with legalizing gambling in the same way that in New York they created off-track betting parlors that were supposed to be in competition with the local bookies to try to put them out of business, so that there would be able to be some sort of generated tax revenue that would help the general populace and the general fund?
Well, when it comes to stopping crime, I can't speak for gambling. I'm not a gambler. I don't know any bookies personally. But I can say that, it's two different areas. But, if it puts a stop to the crime, if, the shady areas of the city are put away because there's a legal option that's safe, then I'm all for that. I'm definitely all for putting as much revenue as we can into the schools of Haverhill, into, fixing the city up. These things could be taxed and regulated, and all of the money could go directly back into the city where we quite honestly need it.
And
I mean, education is a no-brainer. Never say no to that.
In listening to this program, with what you've heard so far, based upon the risk-reward ratio that we were talking about, you think on balance it's a good thing to do and to move forward with that?
I do. I think marijuana in general is a positive step for Haverhill. Someone had mentioned earlier not knowing. The uneducated part is dangerous, and that's true. If people just sort of, wing into it, then they're not going to know what they're talking about, and that's when things get, not right. You need to be able to have the education there by having these places so people do know how beneficial it is versus the stereotype that's been going on for years.
Very good. Thank you very much, Stephanie.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
You bet. Gentlemen, would you like to comment on what Stephanie happened to say? But I do want you to go ahead and make reference to what we had mentioned just before.
I think when we're young, we tend to experiment with things. Alcohol, marijuana. Mm-hmm. And I actually trust these kids, the kids I teach. I trust them to I know we do say marijuana is addictive. I believe that. I think but I do trust that it's not going to become their life.
Okay. Very good. Dr. Maddox, when we talked before about the, you said there's an overabundance based upon what their prescription rate is per patient, and that overabundance could fall into the wrong hands. The question to you was, what if that were curtailed significantly?
Well,
Does that make it any more palatable?
sure. Before I respond to that, I would, the last caller said that this is going to reduce crime. I mean, I think you'd have to understand, why does the chief of police say that this is not his preference to have this in our town? It gives money to the schools. It's going to take more money to buy more health educators to offset the perception that marijuana is harmless. The number of school suspensions goes up as marijuana laws are loosened. The number of IQ points drops. I mean, we're trying to get our MCAS scores up, and we're going to bring in a substance to this town and encourage it that goes against that goal. So I think that to let the comments that benefits crime in schools go unchallenged, I don't want that to happen. I think that there are, if this becomes inevitable, if people have said a couple times, what if the voters really had a chance to speak? The Municipal Mayors Association, of which our mayor is now the president, had a policy statement when medical marijuana was approved, and it said there should be public sessions and public comment before taking a step forward. That wasn't done here. And no. And part of that is part of what is frustrating to me is that the process was sort of trying to take under the table, and I think the city council was upset about that, and that the mayor has apologized for some of what went on, and I respect him for apologizing publicly. The point is, the public really hasn't had a chance, and shows like this, Michael's willingness to come and give both sides of the issue, this is what needs to happen. It doesn't happen often enough in Haverhill. So there's a ballot coming up in November. We vote for officials. There's no reason you can't put a non-binding referendum that says, do you want a dispensary in Haverhill? And if a majority of Haverhill voters say, not only do I approve of the concept, but I want it in this town, all of my concerns about, do we really want it here, they vanish. So if that happens, I will change my approach, and my approach will be, how do we make it as safe as possible? Right now, the ordinance that is being proposed, and Healthy Farms has been involved in drafting their own ordinance in some ways, allows them to give out free samples so that patients can come in for one condition, but try this strain. Maybe you'll like this one better. They have the ability to roll your own vending machines. This is a business. And
these are not doctors.
These are not doctors. The person that's going to be deciding what kind of marijuana you get has had 4 weeks of training that costs $1,500, and that authorizes them to make decisions about your medical condition and what dose of medicine is good for you. The ordinance around these dispensaries requires shrubs to be a certain height, because it is very clear that these people coming out with their month's worth of marijuana supply they're targets. This is feeding a black market, and we know from Colorado, 75% of teenagers that use marijuana got their marijuana from dispensary stock.
So it becomes a subculture in essence. That having said that, let's go to Deb on line 1 so we can get her call in, and then I have some other questions for you, gentlemen. This is a precedent-setting show insofar as that we've not only gone past our regular time period, we've doubled our time period. Now we're going into triple time because of all the calls we're getting. So you must be doing a lot right here. So I just want to thank you once again for being able to be here. Deb, you're on the air. Go ahead, Deb, you're on the air.
Hello?
Yes, Deborah, you're on the air.
Oh, hi. I wanted to call in and just comment on an earlier comment that was made about the 2012 ballot. And I've spoken to many, many people about the marijuana dispensary coming to our town. And many of the folks that I've spoken to have said that if they knew then what they know now, they would never have voted for it. In that, many people who voted for it were thinking that they were going to get a prescription from their primary doctor, and they would go to CVS or Walgreens, which I think was part of the discussion earlier.
Correct. That's right.
And so I think people are a little
confused about how we got from the 2012 ballot to having dispensaries here where there's no doctor actually dispensing the prescriptions. And from the research that I've done, what actually happens is there is a cottage industry of physicians that establish their practices around these dispensaries, and they have licenses to prescribe or to issue medical marijuana cards for various ailments, including depression, anxiety, headaches, and those types of illnesses.
Good. Yeah.
If you can think about that as a cottage industry, then those physicians are writing those prescriptions as a business. They're issuing those cards as a business. And I think many people who voted for medical marijuana in 2012 were not thinking that's how this was going to be. And I think, as several people who called before I did have said, if we had this to do over, it likely would not pass.
Very good. Very good observation, Deborah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do want to mention to you, gentlemen, that when you talked about the forums and public forums and being able to have people voice their opinions and discuss different things, I'm very pleased to tell you we got a call earlier today from a member of the City Council that said they are having their people watch this program very closely for just that purpose, to get a little bit of a feel for what the discussion happens to be, what the alternatives happens to be, and what people are thinking beyond what they may say when they may come to the City Council chambers or may not. The question, I'm sorry, go ahead.
One comment to that.
Yeah.
I give our City Council a lot of credit. This fell in their lap. The whole process of how the DPH and Healthy Farms and their consultant and letters were misrepresented, people were misrepresented. It ended up that the City Council was told, you have to find a zone for this or they'll put it anywhere. And I give the council a lot of credit for not putting it in one of the, I think, most vulnerable areas of the city, but instead citing it where it is. And I would particularly point out Councilor Colin LePage, who has been very helpful, as well as others, understanding what's going on at the DPH level, pushing back, asking questions. So the City Council has given me, as a whole, all 9 of them, has given me a lot of confidence that there is a democratic way to discuss this. There is a democratic and transparent way to make, important and controversial decisions.
It's interesting that, I will make reference again to talk about Nicole Snow, the Deputy Director of the Massachusetts Patient Advisory Alliance, and I asked her, how do we resolve some of these problems that people are always having an issue with? And she said a lot of that, Frank, comes from education, and she goes out to educate different audiences and different things about this issue. So I'm thinking of Laura Mayer, who's up against it as a drug counselor for the city of Haverhill with the entire school system, and there's just not enough of her to go around. So at this point I asked Nicole Snow, I said, so this means you would come to the city of Haverhill and maybe render some assistance to Laura Mayer in being able to educate the students about the misuse and about the hazards of marijuana and how that what is being used in a medicinal format does not automatically transcend into something that's becomes widely spread use across the board. She said, absolutely. So you do that for free, Nicole? And she said, paused, yes. So that's fine. So maybe now we have an extra resource from Nicole Snow from the Massachusetts Patient Advisory Alliance, because I asked her, she said yes, and I'm going to hold her to it if that benefits the city of Haverhill in some way, shape, or form. But when we're talking about education too, education, gentlemen, there's a colossal amount of information with regard to medical marijuana. And there are also various dynamics that come into play with where you'd place a dispensary. And it just seems to me that in many cases, if you're talking to a voter, you're talking to a patient, you're talking to a young adolescent, and I will defer to you, Mr. Schrock, when you're with the kids that you happen to teach, what they want you to do is, if you've got, let's say, 40 minutes or 50 minutes in a period to teach a particular subject, you've got to cut to the chase. Let's get to it. Let's get to it. They want the Cliff's Notes version
They sure do.
of what is it that I should know. And then once they get that, they want to edit that down as well.
Yeah.
You know, so having said that, the problem is that people that want to be educated in the subject perhaps can, and then maybe there are others that, I don't care about the education, just how do I get it? And is the dispensary, could I use the dispensary as a resource for me to get what I want to get, even though I don't happen to have a prescription to be able to go after something of that type? Which speaks to the question I had for you, Doctor. That is, would you be any more amenable to this sort of circumstance if they were to cut back significantly on the amount they happen to give? Because in Colorado, when you say 75% of the people that gain their marijuana in Colorado gain it illegally from people that do get it legally, but they have too much of it, so they then subsequently resell that. Now, you're saying that the people in Massachusetts would wind up getting more in a prescription than they do in Colorado. How do you know that?
That's what the allotment is. The allotment is that you're allowed to get more per month, a higher total amount of marijuana dispensed to you than the monthly amount allowed in Colorado. And that was written in the restrictions. I mean, you have to realize that going back to 2012 and the referendum and the vote, most of the money that went towards that campaign to get that vote passed came from money outside this state. A lot of money came in from Oregon for people who were involved in legalization. A large amount came from the man who made his money through Progressive Insurance. I mean, I'll ask you a question. If the person that made this money out of Walmart, and if money that came out of state came into this state to try to get Massachusetts voters to pass something that they didn't really fully understand, I think there'd be an outrage. But that's really where a lot of this funding came through. That's where a lot of the regulations were written. And I give them credit. I think they really did sneak in under the dark of night and get some things written, because I hear people say over and over, like that last caller, I wish I had known now, I wish I had known then in 2012 what I know now.
In a discussion that I had with the mayor, because we invited not only the city council but the mayor to look in on this program to see if they had any questions, or if they wanted to voice a question, have somebody call in for them if they happen to be busy in a committee meeting, as some city councilors are this evening, and the mayor's at a separate function as well. But it was interesting in my discussion with him and inviting him to partake of the program in a call, where he said that, you know, Frank, if a lot of people just don't like this, they voted for it. So the thing is, if they want to vote for it, if they want to have another vote again, that's what they should do in order to go ahead and voice their disapproval. If they know something now that they didn't know then, referring to Deborah, who happened to call in, she said that in 2012 many people voted for it. As I described to you what I thought the circumstance was going to be, and then somebody told me, well, no, it doesn't have to be marijuana, it can be in pill form. And this is coming from a guy that I thought absolutely would vote for it in the marijuana program as it was presented. My question is, then under these circumstances, would anybody watching this program that happens to be a city councilor or an elected official, would you be in favor, or would it be appropriate to consider having a non-binding, I'm not sure if you could have a binding referendum, but have a non-binding referendum or some sort of an indicator during the next election in November to voice what the true idea happens to be, or the desires of the residents of the city of Haverhill. What do you think about that, Mr. Schroer?
I think it would pass. I think it would pass again. I think it.
It would be confirmatory then.
We have delayed this, and maybe it's a good thing. But I think some of what Deborah said was, about the cottage industry of the doctors.
Yep.
Medical marijuana dispensary, and then you've got the doctors all moving in. I know that's the case in California. This was a question I asked, and from what I understand, a patient has to have a real relationship with the doctor and one of those conditions that are, there's a certain amount of conditions, like debilitating conditions. And you mentioned the security issue. I don't think people are going to be jumping people for their prescription outside of the medical marijuana facility. I just don't think. Instead they break into the CVS and the drugstore. I mean, but I don't think that's.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Why do you think that was part of the ordinance? Why the ordinance is very specific about a dispensary has to have certain landscaping, security.
Yeah.
If that's not I don't know. I was surprised to see it there.
Yeah.
But if it's not a risk, a security risk, then why, I wonder, do they put such stringent requirements?
I think they're trying to just cover everything they can, and they have to hire they do have to hire security and everything and such.
We've got 2 calls left and probably less than 10 minutes to be able to make a run for it, as it were. But the thing I'd like to ask you is this, just to ponder the fact. If there's a referendum, if they're able to get this on the ballot, and if they're able to pass it and basically confirm what it is that the current company wants to go ahead and do as far as the location of a dispensary in the city of Haverhill, would you accept that?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. Two things. One is, it's not approving it again. We never approved it being here the first time.
Okay.
And secondly, go back to something you said earlier in the show, follow the money. If this campaign is carried out leading up to a public vote, which I would completely support, follow the money. Make sure there's not an influx of for-profit companies that will benefit from a yes vote that fund a campaign. I have no interest in this.
Okay.
And so if it goes to a non-binding referendum, I would support that and I would respect that. But the campaign would need to be followed in terms of where is the money coming from? Is it people that genuinely live in Haverhill and want this for their community? And other people on the other side? Or do you have an influx of people that basically are going to profit by a yes vote?
Mr. Schroth, I asked Mr. Maddox, if they had a referendum vote and it passed in a majority, that yes, they want the dispensary in Haverhill, and would you accept that? And how would you feel? He said yes. And if it went the other way, if there was a referendum and they said no, would you accept that?
Of course, of course.
Okay. Let's go. We've got 2 calls left and less than 8 minutes to go, and we've got Stan on line 1. Stan, you're on the air.
Okay, I have a question for the doctors, both of them. If it does come to Haverhill, who is going to control the prescriptions that come in? How do you know they're going to be legitimate doctors that are issuing this prescription? And what record keeping is going to be done to double check that the prescription's illegal? And I'll leave you gentlemen at that to discuss.
Okay, thank you, Stan. Gentlemen?
I believe there is a computer system, and I believe that they enter in the computer. The doctor has entered it. From what I understand, it is well controlled. That you can't come with a prescription and that they haven't got a record of. I believe that's the case.
It's a good question. Okay. Part of what's going to be created here with this cottage industry, there was a similar thing in Lawrence a few years ago where chiropractors and insurance companies teamed up together to build up a little bit of a business there. Mm-hmm. A large percentage of authorizations from a doctor for medical marijuana in Colorado come from a handful of doctors. They create a cottage industry and they do it. So that process and how that gets clarified and confirmed is to be determined, but it is a cottage industry. I will say that we're depending on record keeping. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about a company that's already had to pay 1 fine in this state for not keeping accurate records. So that's a legitimate concern.
I want to get to Richard on this, who's our last caller, but my question is the degree, and I don't know this, but perhaps either of you gentlemen could go ahead and enlighten me on this subject, and that is medical marijuana is prescribed to people that have the severity of reaction to chemotherapy for cancer treatment and multiple sclerosis and other heavyweight illnesses. On that end of the spectrum, let's bring that back now. And it could be also prescribed for somebody that may say, I suffer from a bit of anxiety. Or is that true? I don't know. From what level to what level?
In other states, that's true.
3% of patients in Colorado have cancer. 94% of patients that get medical marijuana in Colorado have a diagnosis of chronic pain. Anxiety is not a recognized diagnosis.
Okay.
So the idea that this is going to help cancer patients, the patients that go to medical marijuana dispensaries are healthy, young males.
Very
That's
good.
the truth.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let's go to Richard. You're on the air.
Hi, Frank. I just want to make two quick points. I know you're in a rush to get. I know you're out of time.
It's okay.
What Dr. Maddox said at the very beginning about a toehold into the door, and I believe it was 2008, we had a vote to decriminalize less than an ounce, to get a ticket if you were caught with possession of less than an ounce. And then in 2012, we had the vote for dispensary, and we also have our legislation now going to have a vote to recreational use, like in Colorado and Oregon. That point, I believe, is going to go, and it'll probably pass, and I'm in favor of it. To regulate it and to tax it, and to use that for infrastructure. Second point, I don't know if you took a tally, Frank, but I did, and 80% of the people that called in were in favor of it. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks for the call.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it. Okay, gentlemen, you need to know that probably during the course of this program, which had run not 30 minutes, not 60 minutes, but went for 90 minutes, if I'm not mistaken, we got more calls from people that came in that were interested in hearing what you had to say than they got on WBZ's Night Side with Dan Ray, who broadcast to 36 states and Canada. So I'm very, very pleased with the level of participation, not only in the audience, but of both of you being able to be here this evening and be able to talk about this all-important subject. In coming to a close, would you have any closing statements that you would like to make? And I would like to just congratulate the both of you for being able to be so articulate in your opposing points of view, because it's immensely important to be able to do that, to be able to have a dialogue, to reach some sort of common ground that everybody can agree to. And in fact, truth be told, that when I talked with Dr. Maddox about being able to be on the program to discuss what I had read about his editorial in the paper, and I said, respectfully, I'd like to talk with somebody that maybe has an opposing point of view. And truth be told, it was Dr. Maddox that recommended you, Mr. Schroth, from an editorial comment that you happened to write in on a letter to the editor as well. So that type of respect for difference and divergence of opinion, I think, should be noted and lauded as well. And if I could, Mr. Schroth, would you like to say something in closing?
Sure. My iPad. Mm-hmm. I used to get, I get the printed edition of the Eagle Tribune. Mm-hmm. And read it every night. But you know what? I bought my iPad, and I love the thing. I didn't know if I was going to like it or not. Things change. We have to think of the future. I think the marijuana thing is going to go by the wayside, and I know it is not a good thing. It is. We all have a bias towards it because it affects people. It affects people negatively. But you can't tell everybody what to do. Is the overall thing. And medical marijuana, I don't know if you remember that lady who came into the city council meeting. It's a little gut-wrenching in some cases that she needs it. She believes she needs it, and you're a doctor. You understand more of this than I do. I do like the pill thing, but things change. Another thing is, I love Haverhill. Haverhill is, I just chose a really great place to live. I live in the Acre. The Acre, pretty good place to live. It's got such a mix of people. But it's where somebody can make a difference. And so I'm hoping a lot more people move into the Acre because the train tracks are so close. You can't buy property south anywhere and afford it. And this is a great community to live. And I think that this is a progressive step, not a regressive step for us, the medical marijuana dispensary.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Schroth. Dr. Maddox.
A couple of quick things, and again, thank you for both of you guys for allowing this discussion that really it's overdue. And I think the interest that you're seeing reflects that Haverhill wants to understand this. They want their voice to be heard, both sides of the issue. And I like the idea of putting it on the ballot and letting the voters speak in an authentic way once and for all. I'll do a quick comment for people that might be interested. We do have a petition that's circulating. We've submitted the first edition of it to City Council. We continue to collect signatures for anybody that's opposed to the dispensary. The petition is available at Community Action from 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock Monday through Friday. You can also email us at an address called pulltheweed.comcast.net. So if people are interested in learning more or signing the petition, you can reach us at one of those two spots. I have a conviction, and I've been talking about this for months. And every time I get tired of it, and I suspect people get tired of hearing from me, I hear a story. I read another story of a heroin death, and if you read the story, it almost always starts out with early marijuana use.
As a gateway drug?
As a gateway drug. I can't fix the heroin problem. It's tragic. I'm here because this is what I can do. There is an opportunity for Haverhill to say, this wasn't handled right, this isn't the right company for us. It's going to be opening soon in Lowell, opening soon in Salem. Patients will get what they need. This is not the right thing for Haverhill right now. And I believe that, and I'm impressed and really honored by the number of people who have dedicated their careers to people in addiction, people in poverty, people who want a better Haverhill that have joined this cause.
Very good, Dr. Maddox. That'll have to be the last word. I just need a 2-second answer from both of you. You could say it collectively. If somebody decided to go ahead and sign a petition for a referendum to put this on the ballot in November, would both of you sign?
Yes.
From a confirmatory standpoint?
I'd have to think about that.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you very, very much for being here. Mr. Schroth, who happens to be has a master's degree in education, is a biology teacher for the Lawrence School System, and Dr. Maddox, John Maddox, who happens to be who's in pediatric practice, but is also the head physician for the Haverhill School Department. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. And we hope that this program has been a point of reference for you. And until next time, my name is Frank Novak. Thanks very much for watching. Gentlemen.